This woman was left shocked when she lightly touched an old sword and got a deep cut on her finger. Within moments, black marks began to appear on her palm, gradually spreading across her entire body. Then suddenly, black blood started coming out of her mouth, and she collapsed to the ground. The others quickly picked her up and made her sit on a chair, but it was as if she was under the influence of some strange force. Just then, the lights went out, and when they came back on, the woman had vanished. Everyone began to feel that something was wrong with this place, and they started regretting their decision to come here. A few hours earlier, some young people had arrived at a famous collector's bungalow. They were from an interior design company and had come at the request of the current owner to plan the transformation of the bungalow into a museum. The bungalow's owner, Rasan, was no longer alive, and the place was filled with thousands of antique items. So his children had called Nina and her assistants to take care of the artifacts. Rasan's son took everyone inside. They were amazed at the sight of the interiors. One of the team members, Hannah, noticed that the bungalow had only one entrance. She said if it was to be converted into a museum, a second exit would be essential to prevent chaos during crowds. Another team member pointed out that the building was very old and would need to be reinforced for safety. Yet another member was attentively noting everyone's comments. During dinner, Ratty expressed that he wanted a display plan ready within 3 days. But the bungalow was huge, which made the task difficult. Nina decided that everyone would have to start working overtime from that very night. Hannah was a bit upset but agreed. However, one of the team members continued to feel a strange, eerie atmosphere. It was 10 p.m. and everyone was busy with their work. During this time, the security guard finished his duty and handed a torch to David, telling him that there were frequent power outages in the area. He also gave a walkie-talkie to the professor so they could stay in contact if needed. Just as the guard was about to leave, the power suddenly went out. After a short while, the electricity came back, and everyone resumed their work. However, a woman named Sandra was trying to avoid doing her work. This angered David and he scolded her. In the heat of the argument, she accidentally pressed a switch. That switch opened a door to a secret basement that none of the team members knew about. She was the first to go down and turned on the lights. Slowly, everyone followed her down, and were shocked to see many rare artifacts. Ruddy was surprised that his father had hidden all these things. At that moment, Maying started looking at a stone tablet that told the story of an ancient king who had died in battle, but was never mentioned in history. It said that his tomb had been excavated in 1970, but a rare artifact had gone missing from there. Strangely enough, that very artifact was now in the basement. On the other hand, Sandra touched an old sword. That small act turned out to be a big mistake. It triggered the same event that had started the original story. Everyone began to wonder where Sandra had gone. Suddenly, the power went out again, creating an atmosphere of fear. Everyone picked up their torches and tried to leave the place quickly. Sandra was then seen standing on top of a statue. Before anyone could react, she vanished in an instant. Panic set in, and everyone's heart started pounding as they searched for her in all directions. Suddenly, she reappeared and lunged at the professor. She pushed him to the ground, dragged him into a corner, and then plunged the old sword she was holding into his stomach. Then she was thrown about 5 meters away. Everyone was stunned to see this. Now they realized that the situation had become very serious. As soon as Sandra turned to the other side, the rest ran to lift the professor, hoping to somehow get him out of the basement. But now that woman was banging her head against a pillar and muttering strange incantations. Then she suddenly ran toward them. Finally, when she reached right behind, it felt as if something very heavy had fallen on her. Somehow, everyone managed to shut the door. Now they all tried to get out of the bungalow together, but they found out that the door opens from a courtyard, and surprisingly, even Rudy, the son of the bungalow's owner, didn't know about it. Meanwhile, Sandra, holding a sword, walked straight toward the door. She caught Nina and licked her face. David, who was standing nearby, picked up an ancient artifact and struck it on her head, but it had no effect. Instead, David was kicked and flung far away. Now picked up a long spear, and after a moment's thought, ran straight at Sandra. He drove the spear into her chest. Thick black blood started flowing rapidly. Everyone thought the danger was over. They again started searching for a way to get out. But the very next moment, Sandra opened her eyes. Everyone was terrified and started running around the bungalow in fear. The three of them somehow managed to hide in a room on the upper floor. Sandra began banging loudly on the door. David was tending to the injured professor. Rudy and his sister were hiding with them in the kitchen. Just as they tried to change their location, they saw that the woman was now walking on the walls. Then suddenly she vanished. While everyone was staring in shock, wondering what would happen next, she reappeared and took the professor away. The others fled to save their lives. Sandra began to beat the professor badly. She pulled his tongue out and slit his stomach open with a sword. One by one, his organs were pulled out. Eddie was watching all this from behind the cupboard above, trembling, but couldn't make a single sound. Meanwhile, something strange began to happen to the old sword. Now his sister and David had hidden in another room of the bungalow. There, David asked Rudy, "What terrifying secret is hidden in this bungalow?" Rudy replied, "Even I don't know." BN said, "This bungalow has always felt scary to all of us. That's why we never lived here. And to be honest, we don't know much about it either. We only knew that the outside world used to call our father the Mad Collector. The king spent his whole life collecting ancient artifacts and rare relics. He spent a fortune on this passion. But one night, some thieves broke into the mansion. A fight broke out between the thieves and the guards. All 7 people were killed in the clash. But the king kept the incident a secret, and afterward, the security of the mansion was made extremely tight. Only one door remained for going in and out. Meanwhile, the guard noticed that the power in the mansion had gone out again. He filled diesel in the generator, and soon the lights came back. At the same time, Eddie seized the opportunity, went to the living room, picked up the wireless set, and tried to call for help. Just then, a terrifying scream of a woman echoed in his ears. Terrified, he fell to the ground. Meanwhile, the guard tried to return to the mansion, but the gate's code turned out to be wrong. Helplessly, he used the key to open the door and went inside. He didn't know that Sandra was already there waiting for him. The guard was attacked, and Chashma Ed silently watched everything from a corner. Just then, that old sword bent once again. This was the 3rd time it had done so. The 3 women hiding upstairs began to come down the stairs trembling. In the next moment, Sandra threw the guard's severed head in front of the 3 women. Screaming, they all ran toward the dining hall. One woman quickly climbed onto the table and lunged at Hina, aiming to stab the sword into her eyes. Just as she was about to do it, Hannah kicked her forcefully and pushed her back. The other 2 women also came to help Hina. Hearing all this from another room, David ran out. He picked up a chair and smashed it into Sandra with full force. Then all of them together pushed the dining table and pinned her down. Once again, everyone started hiding in different places. Rudy and his group hid in the secret room in the basement. 2 women went to an upstairs room, and Eddie was left alone in the mansion. Now Sandra couldn't open the secret room's door, so she changed her target. She reached the room of the 2 women and started banging loudly on the door. The 2 women hid under the bed. Meanwhile, Rudy found his father's old diary. It was written in it that the sword had been made by a mad blacksmith who was sentenced to death by the king due to a mistake. Before dying, he cursed the sword. Whoever keeps it with them would go insane and start killing people. Every time it took a life, the sword would bend once. Only after it bent 7 times would it straighten again. Rudy remembered that in the old robbery case too, 7 people had been killed. Now everyone began to feel that tonight, once again, 7 people would die. Meanwhile, Sandra had reached upstairs. She dragged Nina out from under the bed and stabbed her in the stomach with a sword. Hannah, holding her breath, remained quietly hidden under the bed. The sword bent further for the 3rd time. David was worried about Hannah. Without caring for his own life, he came out of the basement and finally managed to save Hannah. The others also came out. Sandra was now mumbling chants in a terrifying voice. Just then, an arrow came from somewhere and hit David directly. Groaning in pain, he threw the cursed sword aside. Beyond was about to pick it up, but Sandra reached there first and severely injured Beyond's hand. Hannah picked up a piece of wood lying nearby and struck Sandra hard. The sword fell to the ground again, and Rudy quickly picked it up. Another blow from Hannah pushed Sandra into unconsciousness. Hannah immediately supported David, and they all returned to the hall, where they rested for a while. But soon Sandra stood up again. It seemed like she would never die. Maying said that no matter how hard they tried, unless 7 people were sacrificed, this cycle would not end, and whoever touched that sword would eventually die. Now Sandra reached there, and a struggle for the sword began between the 2, during which Rudy's neck was lightly cut. In the end, Sandra managed to regain the sword. That's when Rudy started behaving strangely, as if he had lost himself. Suddenly, he brutally crushed Ed's head. On the other side, Beyond found the guard's dead body and a bunch of gate keys next to it. She quickly unlocked the gate, and just as Sandra reached her, she somehow managed to get out in time. Everyone decided to hide in the mansion's garden. Mayang looked around to make sure Sandra hadn't followed them and went out to get the car keys. But suddenly Sandra attacked him and started strangling him. Hina, who was hiding nearby, saw a lawnmower, picked it up, and hit Sandra on the head with it. This time David, who was still injured, gathered his courage, went near Sandra, and stabbed a sword straight through her mouth. That was his final blow. Sandra was silenced forever. A few months later, that haunted mansion was converted into a museum, and the cursed sword was sealed away forever in a hidden chamber, so it could never claim another life again. With this, the story ends here. Subscribe to this channel for more horror stories like this.